Today, we're going to explore a very fundamental formula function inside of Notion, and that's the if statement. So if you've ever been confused about Notion formulas, this is the best place to start because pretty much everything you want to do with formulas is going to require an if statement. And by the end of this video, I am sure that after some fiddling around with other functions, you're really going to get a good handle of Notion formulas. So, the if statement. What does this mean? What we're going to go over here is how to create a single statement, how to create a single complicated statement, and also how to create multiple if statements in one formula. By the way, I did just release a new template on my Gumroad shop page, which is just a nice digital notebook template called Notion Drafts. All information about that down below, and if you want to follow along, you don't need to copy a follow along page or anything like my other videos. You just need to open up an empty Notion page and you should be fine. So let's just get right into it. Of course, we need a database in order to create this formula, so I'm going to search for a database in the block menu by selecting the / button and looking for table. So the best database to select here to start with for configuring formulas is the table view. So let's click that and go down to new database. Example will be the title. Let's just hide that. And I'm going to delete these second rows. And I'm going to add a new property via this plus button. I'm going to name it formula. Go to type. Down in advanced, you'll see formula. You can edit a formula right inside of the database menu here, or if you click away, you can edit it inside of the cell. If you want to go back to the database menu, it's just these three buttons here next to the new button. So let's add some tags, maybe tag 1, tag 2, and tag 3. But let's only see the first two tags. So let's say in the first example, I just want to know if inside of the tags database, it has the tag showing tag 1. So if I'm brand new to all this, I first want to understand how does this tags property respond to a formula. So if I go into the property section right at the top, I can see my property tags. I'm just going to click on it, and it will give me the syntax of how I should display properties inside of my formula, which is prop, and in parentheses and quotes, the name of that property. So now we see how a multi-select property is viewable in a formula, and that's by a list. So this is a string, so if I were to add tag 3, it would be comma tag 3 as well. So now that I know how it operates, how do I know if tag 1 is inside? I can use a function called contains. And if you want to find more functions that you can use here, you can go down the list of all the different functions. And if you also want to know how a function operates, you can click the name of the function, contains for instance, and it will pop up here. Returns true if the second argument is found in the first. So contains text, comma, text. So contains in text, which is property tags, comma, text. So what I want to find is tag 1. Close out that function. And now I've pretty much answered my question with a checkbox. If I were to add a new row here that maybe only has tag 3, of course, it doesn't contain tag 1, so it will be a false checkbox. So in this case, if you're trying to create a result that is just a checkbox, you don't really need to use an if statement. But what if I want it to return the word true and false? I'm going to use the if statement. So if, open parentheses, I can click on if, see how this works. So if boolean, which is our statement here, comma, show value, that's the true statement, comma, show another value, that's the false statement. So that's if this is not the case. So let's say comma, our true statement will be the string true, comma, the false will be the string false. And close that if statement out with one parentheses because we only have one statement here. So you'll notice that indeed this is now true and false. And if I wanted the true statement to again be a checkbox, I can just delete these quotes. Will bring me back to the same result of checkboxes. Now you may notice I might want a true checkbox but a false string. Can I do that? No, you cannot do that. You will get an error that says type mismatch, false is not a checkbox. So the true condition and the false condition need to be the same property type. That being either a checkbox property, a string, a number, or a date. So let's make these numbers. Maybe the false condition can be 0 and the true, the number 1. Or we could have the word true and just a blank space if it is false. And that would just be 2 quotations with nothing inside. I want to make a calculation inside of the true statement. So let's turn this back into a number. 1 and the false condition will be 0. Let's create 2 number properties. So one more property called number1, type number. Number2, type number as well. And let's just give these random numbers. So in the formula now, what I want to say is if in tags contains tag 1, calculate number 1 plus number 2. So the sum. So we can just click properties plus number 2. So just like creating a blank cell with string with the empty quotes, if you want to create an empty space with a number property, you may be wondering, how do I do that? Because if I do 2 quotes, it will have a type mismatch error. Well, what you're going to have to do is use one of the functions called toNumber, which converts anything to a number, if it is not already. So toNumber, and then just nest those quotes inside. Great, we have a complicated true statement. You can also do that with the false statement. So maybe instead of toNumber, empty space, let's say number 2 minus number 1. So because the true statement and the false statement still return a number, it will work, even though we are looking at a property that is a string. Just like you can convert a string to a number, you can actually convert a number to a string. So if you want to do something like this and have our true condition here be actually a string, let's use the format function and nest it inside. You'll notice a mismatch error. It's because our false condition also needs to be a string. So let's format that as well. You'll notice the number goes to the left-hand side. Now after that format, I can say plus and in quotations, maybe space seats. Same here with the false condition, I can say maybe space seats left. So that gives some context to these numbers. But unlike with our number columns, you can calculate them at the bottom here, like finding the sum. Now you won't be able to do that with this formula because it is a string, not a number. So now we know how to create complicated true conditions and false conditions. Let's look at the statement itself and make this complicated. Let's add something to it. Let's say not only if tag 1 is contained in tags property, conduct this formula, but also if the title here, the name property, is filled out or not empty. So just like with the tags property, let's look at how the name property is compatible with a formula. And I'm going to create a test formula to do this. I'm going to call it test. Now I do this a lot with complicated formulas just to break things up. This is a temporary formula. And inside, let's look at name. So of course, this is just going to give us the name. I'm going to put in an example, test string. So it does give us the actual string, which is what I assumed. Now I do want to see if the property is empty or not. So I'm going to use the empty function. And it will return a checkbox true if it is empty, but I want to see if it is not empty, so filled out. So I'm just going to add a not at the front, and it will switch that true and false. Great. So I'm going to copy this, and right after the subject here, contains tag 1, I'm going to say and, I'm going to paste in and not empty prop name. So if name were empty, it will give me the false condition. If it has something inside, it will give me the true condition. Okay, so let's actually make this more interesting and add dates. So let's add a date property. Date. And I know you're going to use dates a lot in Notion, so this is really good to know. Let's add a random date. Let's actually add today. And using that test property, let's take a look at how dates react. Just gives us the date. So what I want to know is, does this date land on today? So I could use the equals now function, and you'll notice that the checkbox is false. So let's check out why that is. So if I just have now, it gives me the date and the time, whereas the date is just the date. So it technically does not equal the date. What I'll have to do is format both of these to string properties. And just like formatting a number into a string uses the format function, we need to use the format date function for dates. So let's format date to maybe just capital L and say equals formatting the date of now to the same format, capital L. So let's say in formula, tag 1 is in tags and name is filled out, or date is today. So we're just going to paste that formula in, the formatting the date, equaling the formatting of the date of now. Great, so let's test this out. Let's see down here, we have none of our statements. We do not have tag 1, the date is not today, and the string is empty. Now it did say, or the date is today, so we don't need tag 1 or filled out name. We could just have today's date. And you'll notice that the true condition has now been triggered. Now let's take a look at how to create multiple if statements. So let's first delete all of these properties that we have here because we don't really need them anymore. Let's keep the formula and keep the date property. So with the date property, I do want to add a time. So I'm going to click on that date and include time. 5 a.m. and for the next one, 1 p.m. Okay, so I'm going to clear out this formula, and what I want to do here is create a formula that tells me if this date and time lands in the morning, the afternoon, or the evening. So what we'll need is 3 different if statements, but technically we'll only need 2 with a false condition, and I'll show you why. So firstly, let's figure out how this formula responds to this new date property. We have the date and time. Now let's nest this inside of the hour function. This will give us an hour between 0 and 23. So we can work with this number here. So I can say, firstly, if the hour is less than 12, then give me the string morning. False condition, let's just keep that an empty space for now. So the order of your if statements is really important. The first one is always going to override the next, and the next, and the next. So what I mean by that is this. Let's create our second if statement for the afternoon, right before that false condition. If the hour of date is less than 17, then afternoon. Let's have another comma for that false condition. So we have 2 if statements now, and the false condition at the end. You'll notice at the bottom it says closing parentheses expected at character 84. That's just the last character. Let's add that to the end. So a good thing to keep in mind is as you're stringing along if statements, the number of parentheses at the end should match the number of if statements you have. If the above two do not apply, then of course it's going to be the evening. So the order of operations here should always be the lower numbers first to the higher numbers when you're working with less than. So for instance, if I were to put the afternoon before the morning, all results will say afternoon because it is asking all hours before 17, which includes the hours in the morning. So really this is just a logical order of operations to keep in mind. Now, make sure to test by adding a new empty row and seeing what happens to your formula. Here it says evening, which is because it is triggering the false condition evening. So even though it still works, this is a little clumsy. Let's click through and actually make this whole if statement here. Let's make this a true condition. So let's actually nest it inside of another if statement. I'm just going to create a space there and put my cursor back to the open parentheses. And just say, not empty, so filled out is the date property. If that is the case, the true condition is going to be the formula we just made. And then at the end, let's create a false condition, comma, empty space. And you'll see that that evening has disappeared. Another way to do it is to just create a third if statement at the end for evening. But first, let's test and make a time for the evening. Let's say 5:30 p.m. And it does say evening, which is great. So like I said, you could also do a third if statement, and let's look at how that works. So from what we had before, let's, instead of that false condition, add a third statement. And really, since we're kind of using the same syntax here, let's just copy this first one. Let's say if hour up to morning, and then comma. Copy that, paste it to the end here, and have a false condition at the end. Let's say less than 24 is evening. And then a third parentheses at the end because we have three if statements. And now it will still leave an empty space upon creating a new row, and the formula still works. So that's how you work with numbers. It's different for dates though. So with the same date property, let's actually change this one to maybe the 30th. Add a new row to a date that's in the past, the 22nd. And let's determine if a date lands on today, in the past, or in the future. This is good for task managers, and I'm going to get rid of these time properties to do this formula. So what I like to do is at the very top, the first if statement is going to find today. And then the next will find all dates in the past, and then if statements at the end, all dates in the future. I have one date for today, that's going to be the first one. So let's start with that. And we've already looked at how to find today. That is by saying format date of the date, L equals the same, and I can just copy this, and just remove prop date with now. So if that's the case, then give me the string today, comma, the next if statement for the past, if the date is less than now, then give me past. And what you can do here, just like we did with the times of the day, is just say false condition is future. And close that out with two parentheses. Let's test this. We have the 27th tomorrow, that would be the future. Today the 26th, today. And the 25th will be the past. What happens if I have a new row? It says the future again. So let's just add a third if statement. Just clear all this out. Say if the date is greater than now, then let's say the future, otherwise empty space. Now let's do 3 parentheses to close this out because there are 3 statements. And it'll give us the same result. We can add a 4th statement to return if a date is tomorrow. So the 27th. And let's make a test formula to see how we can return the result for tomorrow. I like breaking it down like this just in case I get something wrong in the formula and I want to know where I went wrong. If I add 1 day to today, which is tomorrow, does it equal the date here? So to do that, I can use the date add function to now, comma, 1 days. So if I click on date add, it'll give you the syntax again of that function and all the different things you can use: years, quarters, months, weeks, days, and so on. I'm going to add 1 day, which does give me the 27th plus the time, because now includes a timestamp. So I do want to format this. I want to format the date because our date property does not have a time. And comma, so this is now the new date we're working with. I'm going to format that with a capital L. I'm going to say, does that equal formatting the date of the date to a capital L? And all of the checkboxes true should only be for tomorrow. So the 28th should be unchecked, 27th should be checked. So let's copy this, go back into the formula, and right before future I want to put tomorrow because I want to trigger the result for tomorrow so it doesn't get confused with the future. Because if the future statement was before tomorrow, tomorrow would always say future, right? So we want it to be acting before the future statement. So if, right in here, third to last, if, and I'm going to copy what I just had on my clipboard in test, if indeed it does equal tomorrow, then give me tomorrow, comma. Now I have 4 different statements. I have the first for today, the second for the past, the third for tomorrow, and the last for the future. And then the false condition, and now I need to add 1 last parentheses at the end because I have 4 if statements. So that's kind of how I like to do things. I like to have these little test properties to break all of these statements down, especially when you have a ton of them. And yeah, that's all I really wanted to share with you. These are the basics of the if statement and how I go about problem solving to make my formulas work. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I really hope that you got something out of it, especially if you were looking at how to use Notion formulas better. And I will see you guys next time with a new video and the rest of the week on Twitter. I'll see you then.